What's good, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to Contesting the Point. I'm your host, Malik Forté, and we just came off a crazy Seattle home series. And who better to argue over my scorching hot takes than the two guys we started this show with? We got Chance and Nameless in the building. What's up, my guys?
Feeling good, living better, man. Excited to go against Chance once again.
I'm feeling salty now that you brought that back up. Just nothing but bad memories, but at the very least, it'll be a good time.
Indeed. Well, let me go ahead and refresh everybody on the rules for those who might have forgotten. This is how it works. I'm going to present a headline from the CDL. I'm then going to give a hot take on the story. One of the guests will defend that hot take while the other attacks it. I'll award points for convincing arguments only. And after 3 stories, whoever has the most points wins 60 seconds to pop off in the ASTRO listen up moment. Does that sound great to you guys?
Perfect.
Yep.
All right, let's go ahead and jump into this thing. Kicking it off with our first story. The Chicago Huntsmen are your Seattle home series champions, and they did so in pretty dominating fashion, defeating the London Royal Ravens in the finals 3-1. This win right here puts them atop of the CDL standings. And what's crazy is they just added Prestinni 4 days prior to the event. And, you know, they were struggling a little bit before, so I personally don't want to jump the gun and call them the best team quite yet. So with that, my hot take for this first story is that Dallas and Atlanta are still better teams. Nameless, though, you seem to be feeling Chicago and what they've been doing lately, man. Why am I wrong about that?
Yeah, so that is definitely a hot take. You know, before this tournament, I would have definitely agreed with that statement, but I have to disagree now. They've all won 2 events. I think it's up in the air at the moment. Chicago making that change and picking up Prestinni and winning right away is extremely impressive. You saw them talking about how they didn't have much practice going in. That is unbelievable to me. And their progression throughout each match in this tournament, they got better and better each time. It wasn't just Prestinni that was playing well. It was everybody on the team. We saw Formo have one of his best performances the entire season. Scump in the final was a different beast, right? At times, it was just Arcees and Envoy that were taking over for this team. Now it's the entire squad that's contributing. They have the same amount of wins as Dallas and Atlanta. I just don't think it's fair to say that they're not in that discussion for best team in the game. I feel like they're up there with those 3. And, you know, it's pretty equal across the board. And another thing is Chicago and Atlanta haven't even faced off again. Haven't even faced off yet, excuse me. They haven't even faced off the entire season. So we can't even say who's better between the 2. I mean, Dallas has beaten Chicago, but that was the old Chicago. We just saw a new one wipe the floor with the entire tournament. I think that it's unfair to say that they're not in that discussion, and I think you could pick any 3 of those teams to name them top team in the game.
I feel you. Any of those teams could be top, but right now the discussion is Chicago the top team? And I don't know. It's tough to say. You do make some good points, though. The fact that they never faced off against Atlanta is something that stands out to me. But Chance, what are you saying on the flip side of that? You're not too convinced that Chicago's the top team, are you?
I mean, no, not at all. And well, a top team, yes, absolutely. That I do not argue with. But it's saying that they are the top team, that's where I don't agree. And like, I'm going to use Nameless's point against him of like, before the tournament, he would have said, no, Chicago absolutely not better than the Dallas or the FaZe. And guess who wasn't at the tournament? Dallas or FaZe. So like, they won a tournament where the 2 best teams in the game weren't there. That, in my mind, like, you can't leapfrog the Chicago Huntsmen above them when they never had to play. Like, you're exactly right. They haven't played FaZe, so it doesn't make sense to me how you can say that sort of that one is better than the other. But at the same time, FaZe has always looked better at pretty much every single event, or at least just about, that they've gone not head-to-head, but that they have both been at. FaZe has just looked better all year. Chicago look better now, yes, but again, not against the same level of competition that all of these other teams are having to go against. I haven't seen enough evidence yet. Their domination is still a little bit shaky, right? They go 2-2 on the weekend. Really, for me, the most impressive thing about the Huntsmen is how good their search and destroy has been the entire year. Prestinni comes into that game mode, and he was playing lights out. Incredible, right, the entire time. But we didn't see the same level of production in the respawn, especially so in the domination. It just wasn't quite as clean. And so, yes, you could talk about making improvements, but until they beat one of those 2 top teams, I'm not going to leapfrog them and put them in that spot.
Yeah, I don't have them number 1. I'm just saying that it's a discussion. Like, I can't say that Dallas and Atlanta are for sure better than Chicago. I think that right now it's pretty much equal across the board in those top 3. And any one of those teams can win a tournament on a given day. So I'm not saying that they're definitively better than those 2, but it's definitely a discussion. And Dallas and Atlanta are not definitively better than Chicago. That's my argument for that.
Well, they have looked, those two teams, I would say, have just looked stronger over the course of the entire year, outside of the one tournament that
they all have 2
won
wins
towards the start on land. But yes, but look at the strength of the schedule for the win this past weekend. Chicago Huntsmen won a tournament that the Empire and FaZe were not at. That is not as strong of a tournament
their fault.
as the tournaments.
They look great.
I'm not saying it's their fault, and I'm not saying they're a bad team. I'm just saying they've done nothing to definitively prove that they are a top team above the FaZe and above the Empire.
Other than win 2 events.
In my mind, still the Empire and FaZe are above them.
Other than win 2 events, they've done nothing. All right, that's
fair. All right. Well, you guys both make compelling arguments. Chance, it does stand out to me that they have not faced off against Atlanta, but I don't want to put Chicago out front quite yet. I think that Chance makes all the good points as far as Chicago being a team that still has a little bit more work to do before we can really give them that solid #1 spot. So with that, I'm going to give this first round a chance. 4-3 is our count after the first round. The Chicago Huntsmen, they look great. They look dominant. I just want to see more. I want to see the consistency. And once we see that, then we can put them at #1. All right, for our next story, we already mentioned that the London Royal Ravens made the finals before falling to the Chicago Huntsmen at the Seattle home series. Now, despite losing, the Ravens looked improved with Zero in the lineup. And after a bit of a dry spell for the Royal Ravens, Zero made them a legit contender during that Seattle home series, taking them all the way to the end. So, with that in mind, Zero on the team, my hot take is that the Royal Ravens will finish the season top 4. Now, Chance, could you tell the people why that is 100% factual?
100% factual, of course. I can predict the future. I am a seer. So not factual, but I think you have a very reasonable, very strong argument for Ravens being top 4, right? Like, who are the teams that they need to pass? The Florida Mutineers and the Minnesota Røkkr. The Røkkr are like 40 points above them, I think, in the standings right now, which is quite a ways to go. But the Røkkr can't even make it out of groups anymore. They've been struggling like crazy in the online format with these tournaments, so their point production has not been very high. The Ravens look fantastic. They go from barely earning 10, occasionally 20 points at a tournament. Now they're placing second, looking incredible with the roster change that they made. So I think very reasonably they could catch Røkkr because those guys are in a rut. And then for the Florida Mutineers, I'm not really convinced about this team being like a top 5 roster right now. I think their like potential, their skill cap is that high, but I think on a consistent basis, they're not really going to put up the same level of production that I think this new Ravens team absolutely can. I think they look incredible. I think they have a lot more consistency of the respawns. I think their SMD is actually a little bit crazy. They have a pretty deep map pool, especially when Wuskins is apparently the best sniper in the game. So they're 20 points down on the Florida Mutineers. I think they could catch those guys no problem. They're a little bit of ways down from the Røkkr, but the Røkkr are not the same team they were at the start of the year, so the Ravens could definitely catch up to them. And then it's about making sure that no one can surpass the Ravens. And of course, the team that's closest to beating them, at least in the standings, the one team that's right below them is Optic, who, yes, they look great, but they just had the head-to-head matchup at the most recent event. Ravens beat them in a game 5, so yes, it's close, but they already have that edge. They look incredible as a team, and that's only on a couple days, maybe a week or so of practice. I think they're going to be good to go to get that top 4 and potentially even a little bit higher. I think they are a threat to start beating these top teams.
Ooh, okay. So, Chance, you're actually putting them above the 4th spot, possibly. But
again, potentially for beating them for CDL points, no, not at all. But come champs time, I think this Ravens team is definitely a threat to making a deep run.
The Royal Ravens, a serious contender in the eyes of Chance. But Nameless, how are you feeling about this?
Yeah, there's a lot of arguments against this take, and I was actually just trying to figure out where to start, but I guess I'll start here. So, starting soft a little bit. London Royal Ravens, they got second place. They entered their honeymoon phase when they picked up Zero. It happens with every team. They look fantastic. We don't know how good this team truly is yet. We need to see them in a few more showings. So that's one thing. Another thing is there's a lot of teams that are in that sort of middle of the pack area. You look at Optic Gaming Los Angeles. You look at the New York Subliners. These guys might still be another change away from their final form roster. You look at Royal Ravens, that's their final roster. They're not going to make another change. These other two teams, they might still shop around and make some changes. So with surge players out there, stuff like that, they can get even better. And that's, even if they don't do that, they can still advance into that top 4 position. They're not that far out from the Royal Ravens in points. And even for any of those teams to do it, it's unlikely because the Røkkr have been consistent throughout the season. They've dipped a little bit, but they can still hold that spot. They're 40 points ahead of the Royal Ravens and even more against those other teams. So I think that it's a very tall task for the Royal Ravens to finish the season in the standings in the top 4. I think at champs, it's definitely possible, but I think it's unlikely that they get into that 4th place position. There's too many teams that are on the cusp, and there's too many points that they need to gain to get there. So I think it's unlikely. I don't think it'll happen, but at champs, maybe.
So if I'm reading your argument correctly, though, one is there's a hypothetical that some of the teams below them might make changes and pick up some
I'm in the loop,
whatever.
bro. I hear this stuff, all right?
I'm just saying, you have a hypothetical argument, which to me is like, all right, fine, like I'll play
all right,
the
so
game
wipe that one off the table. They still need a lot of points, yes?
Right, they still need a lot of points, but then you also went and said that the Røkkr have been consistent, which is just simply not true. They were great at the start of the year. Now they can't make it out of groups. That's not consistent. That's the absolute
everybody has every team. We're going to talk about this in the next topic, by the way, show audience. But
we're going to talk about the Røkkr, but let's stick on the Royal Ravens.
The thing is like the Røkkr have been solid, and every team has a different performance, right? Like it's going to happen, but they still have been solid, and they look decent. They've been losing in some close games. Like I'm not completely sold that they're a terrible team yet, but. And, in our next topic, we'll talk a little bit more about it, so I won't oversell it.
I was going to say, I'm not saying terrible, but I'm definitely saying not consistent. You've got our ex who went from putting up like a 1.3 on land, now he's dropping like a 0.88. That's not what consistent is.
Fair.
So you have a hypothetical, and then just your second argument is just incorrect. So I don't know what to do with that.
I mean, they're far out. They're far out from 4th. They're far out from 4th. I just think it's unlikely. I think it's unlikely.
Yeah, Chance, I feel like Nameless did make some good points, though. He did make some good points. I'm with you on the Royal Ravens being a strong contender at champs. I do think that. But I feel like there's so many other teams that have been getting better. And Nameless pointed it out, one of them, the New York Subliners. If we flip the bracket and OGLA is playing against the Chicago Huntsmen instead, and the Subliners are instead playing against the Royal Ravens, how do things pan out? I don't want to get into hypotheticals.
The Subliners, who are still struggling to win dominations, whose search and destroy still isn't great. Like, their hard point is incredible. Yes, Mac melts up the team, but like the Subliners didn't improve. And again, they've had an extra couple weeks of practice compared to the Ravens, who had just a couple days or maybe a week total. And the Ravens seem to have improved even more than New York did.
Let's talk about Optic, though. Like, Optic Gaming and Royal Ravens, they've been pretty much back and forth over the last 2 tournaments. I mean, they edged them out in game 5.
They played.
That's fair.
They won the game 5, they had the CDO.
They both have a second place, but they've been pretty much back and forth. And if you really want to talk about who won the last time they played, shall I pull up the TJ Halley grenade clip? Because I mean, if we pull that one up, then it might explain a little bit. It might explain a little bit. So like those guys have been back and forth. And the hot take was that the London Royal Ravens will finish the season in the top 4. I just feel like it's too early to say that, and solidify it. There's just too many teams that are close. But you
just
make a
to
good
go
argument.
a little bit further, by the way, the Røkkr, that's the team that is more difficult for the Ravens to catch because they're 40 points down. Do you know who all of their groups are for the next like 3 tournaments that those guys play?
Well, just wait a bit.
It is a plethora of just nothing but FaZe, Empire, and Chicago. Every single tournament that the Røkkr are going to be dealt with, they can't even make it out of groups.
I love that you're making this point.
I love
that you're making this point for the next topic.
All right, we're going to jump into the next topic, but I'm going to give this round a chance. Chance, you finally defended that. I was really leaning toward Nameless. I was really leaning toward not giving the Royal Ravens that top 4, but I think you made all the points necessary, man. It's kind of hard to deny it. And plus, I tried to counter with the Subliners. They beat the Subliners last weekend. So with that being said, that puts you, Chance, at 8 points, Nameless at 6 at the end of 2 rounds.
So I'm gonna have to smoke.
I may have screwed myself for the end, though. So.
I'll be. Yeah, you just screwed yourself with the last statement. I mean, I think you solidified that round, so I'll have to smoke you on this one to win. But hell, you made some good arguments, though. You almost changed my opinion there.
All right, it's time for our last story. You got a bit of a sneak peek of what was to come in the last topic, but we're getting ready to talk about the Minnesota Røkkr because they have been struggling quite a bit as of late. Now, they appeared to be an easy top 4 team, finishing second at the Dallas home series. But since then, however, the Røkkr have failed to make it out of groups in every event they've been to, which is 2. So, my hot take is that the Røkkr need to make a roster change ASAP. Chance, you seem to have a lot of things to say about the Røkkr, but what do you have to say about this, man? Should they stay the same?
I will say I am not a hypocrite at all, and yes, they should stay the same. They do not need to make a roster change. Like, no, they haven't quite been consistent in the past few tournaments, but I think a very large part of that is due to format, due to a mindset, and I think the team just generally is in a rut. I think looking at GodRx is the perfect example of this, of like being like, look, he went from throwing up roughly a 1.3 on all the tournaments they had on LAN where they looked incredible. Now the past two, he's been throwing up roughly a 0.88. That is a massive change, and if you're talking about a team that needs to make a roster change, GodRx is not a guy you should ever drop, especially not this year that he has been having. I think it's much easier to look at a player like that being like, okay, there's something going on with the team that's causing just across the board players to fall off just a little bit. That's what they need to go back, game plan, figure out fix their mindset, and then I think they'll be good to go, right? Like, normally when you're making a roster change, you want to get rid of the worst player on your team. GodRx has the most massive switch right now in terms of performance from pre-COVID to post-COVID, whatever it's going to be. He is not a player you want to drop. I think by champs time, he's going to bounce right back with almost no issue, and I think the Røkkr are going to be very, very good to go. They just need to find a way to get out of the mental rut that they're in. Nameless, dude, you got it. Don't laugh at me, man. I'm doing my best.
I think it's hilarious. Hearing you attack that was just hilarious after our last discussion. So you're thinking the Royal Ravens are going to come up into 4th place. That would mean the Røkkr would have to have a terrible outing at their next few tournaments, not make it out of groups. And you think that they need to stick it out and have a player just start to improve? So, like, I just don't understand the argument. It just sounds kind of hypocritical. I think that with the teams out there are struggling right now. You look at the Surge, great talent on that entire roster, completely struggling. Gunless is out there. Minnesota are one of the teams that players want to play for right now. Minnesota have been solid, and teams know that if they go there, they will find, or players know that if they go there, they will find success. I think that it is time to make a roster change, and a great argument for that is look at the semifinals of this very last tournament. All 4 teams made a roster change, and they look to have been improved tremendously. I think that the Minnesota Røkkr are one change away from being a championship team. You know, they look like it in the beginning of the season. They've dipped off a bit. If they make that change, it might propel them forward, and if they were ever going to do it, don't do it too late. Now's the time to shop around and figure it out while you're still in that 4th place position. You've recognized that your team isn't performing that great. You can still make a change and propel yourself forward for that $2 million payday at the end of the season. I think it's time that they look around and do it while players are available. I think they can make a big change.
And I would just go back a little bit to try to avoid being the hypocrite and say, like, you can make a roster change for this team, and there are great players out there that are available. I don't think it's worth the risk, and I also think it kind of defeats the point of, like, the theory that the Røkkr had when they crafted this team. It's not 5 players that are, like, the biggest superstars in Call of Duty, but they went for a team that is, they're going to be professional, they're going to always be putting the work in. Like, they went for a chemistry-minded team. I don't think you need to shake that up. Like, no, things don't look great, but that's the point of when the going gets tough, you need the professional players. They're going to be able to bounce back. And we saw towards the start of the year when, like, Atlanta FaZe was at a certain point the clear-cut best team. For whatever reason, the Røkkr just, like, had their number. Like, the Røkkr are still a sneaky team, and yes, some teams might be catching up or maybe even potentially past, and maybe the top of pack has separated themselves just a little bit, but I still think by the end of the year, they just have to grind it out. They still have, like, they're just in a weird spot.
One final argument to this, because those are good points. Those are good points, and I actually like what you just said, sticking it out. But one final argument to this is, let's not forget that in the final months of every Call of Duty, the teams that have the most talent, they usually figure it out, and the teams that were good in the middle, like the Røkkr form teams that have the chemistry, that have the teamwork, they tend to struggle a bit at the end versus those teams. Once everybody's figured out the meta and they master it by the end of the game, it gets more difficult. So it might not be a bad play for the Røkkr to go out, shop out, and get a really talented player, bring them into the fold, bring them into that system. And if they are as professional as you say they are, they can do that and they can figure it out. And they'll be able to get a good dynamic around said player by the end of the season and get prepared for champs. But it takes time, right, to figure that out. So right now they would have to do it. They only have 3 more tournaments that they're going to play at before champs. They have an extremely tough group in each one of those tournaments. As Brian Saint tweeted out, it's like FaZe and Empire in each one of their groups. It's tough. That would be a good test with the new players. So I think now would be a good time to do it.
And just to, I just want to take the moment though, Malik, if you allow me. Just saying, you're saying that players by the end, the players with the higher skill cap come champs time, once they've had the entire year to figure the game out, that's where they're really going to shine. If you look at last year, GodRx is performing at champs. He was lights out playing for you. He was incredible at champs last year. And again,
I'm not saying they get rid of GodRx though.
But again, like, why would you make the change when the player that has had the most wild shift in explaining your performance dropping off is the GodRx, who goes from a 1.3 to a 0.88? By the end of the year, come champs time, we're expecting him to be back.
This is why. We're not getting rid of GodRx, and this is why. What Chance is saying, I know what you're saying. He's the reason that you're not performing as well. Either way, they still haven't gotten a win. I don't think your team should live or die by GodRx. He's not Crimsix. He's not like he's not formal. He's not one of these guys. Like, GodRx is a great player. Could you imagine if he was alongside another superstar, how good that team would be? That's my argument for that. Because GodRx is such a good player, and he's going to have tournaments like that. Like, you got to get a superstar onto that team for them to win championships. Even when GodRx was playing, even when GodRx had the Michael Jordan like Mike shoes on and was dropping 1.5s, they didn't win a tournament. So unless he returns to that and then they get into the top 3 position, I mean, I think you need another player on there, and then they're winning a championship. Like, I was dropping 1.5.
There are 2 world champions on this team, one of which has an MVP. Like, who are you going to drop? Are you saying Alex or Asim at that point?
The odds were completely stacked against him. Completely stacked against him to win that tournament when you look back.
Okay, so what you're saying now is the odds are stacked him again. Look at their pools. They got to play against FaZe, Empire, Chicago.
No, I get it. But don't you want those odds to be a little bit more in your favor? You don't always want to be fighting an uphill battle. Try to get a player. Look at the surge, man. If they were to bring in one of those players, like, dude, you can bring in Apathy. He's had success with Silly and Assault.
Hell no.
That'd be amazing.
Look, now nowhere near as good as Alex and Asim.
Unbelievable. You bring in Gunless. Could you imagine on that team? He's teamed with Silly before. Won a championship. Like, there's players out there. I think you do it. I think you do it for sure.
Yeah, Chance, I totally get what you're saying. GodRx, he lives up to his name. You don't want to change that guy. But if not GodRx, the question is who? That's where I'm at. I feel like Nameless is hitting the nail on the head with that. And he threw so many names out there. The folks like Gunless. And I think about these changes happening for real. And I'm like, oh, this would be great. This would be great for the Minnesota Røkkr. So with that being said, I am giving this round to Nameless. I should deduct a point from you, Chance, for being a hypocrite. But I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. So that puts our final score, because this round was Nameless 5, Chance 4. That puts our final score at 12-11. Chance, you are the winner of the Astro Listen Up moment. Despite being a hypocrite, we'll give it you 60 seconds to pop off to the people. What do you have to say to everyone?
I would say this has been an interesting episode because, like, obviously the point of the show is, Malik, you're giving the hot takes, and then we're just assigned whether to attack or defend. So occasionally we have to make arguments that we don't believe, but that actually doesn't explain my hypocrisy away, and I don't quite have an answer of what it is because I actually do believe that the Ravens could be top 4. No, I'm not saying it's the most likely thing, but I do think they're strong. I do think the potential is absolutely there. So I have belief in my point I was making for point number 2, but I also believe the third thing as well. I really don't think the Røkkr should make a change. I think that would be absurd if they did. Yes, there's great players out there. There is that potential, but this isn't a team where I think you mess with it. So I don't know exactly how to absolve myself of being a hypocrite for those 2 arguments, but there's something there. But either way, thought it was a good episode. I think all the teams now, I'm excited for everyone because everyone's starting to look better. Outside of the teams at the very bottom, the competition is on point right now in the CDL. It seems like the COVID era, definitely we've taken some hits. It's been a little bit sloppy, but it seems like we're starting to get into the swing of things as a league, and I'm just excited for the future.
Chance, that's so funny. I'm with you, man. I feel like the competition has been top notch here at the CDL, and I'm looking forward to see how this season plays out. Thank you so much, though, for your 60-second Astro Listen Up moment. That does it for this edition of Contesting the Point. Thanks once again to Chance and Nameless for bringing the fire on this episode. And guys, we'll be back next week to take a look forward at the Minnesota Home Series event. We'll see you then.